Brought to you by Charity Mobile, the phone company that supports life and family. 5% of your monthly plan price goes to your favorite charity. Buy the way you believe at CharityMobile.com and use promo code TRADITION.
The open followers of Satan have been in the news quite a lot recently, beyond the story that we're hearing out of Kansas. That story out of Kansas is front and center, of course, these days for obvious reasons. We're going to be dealing with that here as we are just days away from their diabolical event, with the consecration of Kansas and acts of reparations being led by the Archbishop directly in the case. But the culture itself has been increasingly satanic in recent years. And I'm not talking about morons in the pop culture, musicians trying to be edgy and losing their own souls in an effort to offend Christians, because most of the people doing that just think that this is a great way to get parents to protest outside their concerts. It's a story as old as time. Most of them don't believe a thing they're saying. Some of them do, though, so be wary of them, but most of them are what's called LARPing, live action role playing. Basically, they're sitting there trying to pretend to be evil when they actually are evil, but not for the reasons they think they are. They're trying to get free advertisement by offending Christians. That's not what we're talking about here, though. We've seen some sustained attacks in the culture that are rarely addressed, and some that come from governments themselves. I'm going to show you one. It's an unfortunate kind of offense that happens all the time, and I'm surprised that this one actually happened. And this is, speaking of Kansas, headline: Police arrest suspect for desecrating Wichita Catholic Church. FBI aiding investigation of alleged crime of being hateful. Now, you know about that Black Mass that's coming up in Kansas. Note the date. March 17th was when this was reported. Now, I'm very curious if the person doing this is going to be a participant or had intended to be a participant at that little event going on in the state capitol. Let me know if that's the case, but I would be very curious. Here are the details. Authorities say they arrested a 23-year-old man on Sunday in connection with an alarming act of vandalism and burglary at St. Patrick Catholic Church in Wichita, Kansas, which has left the parish community shaken. And yes, I know, Wichita is not exactly right next to Kansas City. I know. The attack, which occurred early Saturday morning, involved significant destruction to religious statues, smashed glass, and the defacing of sacred spaces. An American flag was also burned inside the church. According to the local news, the Wichita Police Department and the FBI have been involved in the investigation. Recognizing the severity of this crime, WPD officers and investigators, alongside the ATF, immediately launched a full-scale investigation, the Wichita Police stated on Facebook Sunday morning. Our dedicated crime scene investigation team worked diligently to analyze evidence, leading to the swift identification of a suspect. According to the police, a suspect was charged with burglary, criminal desecration, and criminal damage to property. They also said the case will be presented to the Sedgwick County District Attorney and federal prosecutors for formal charging considerations. This reprehensible act of vandalism will not be tolerated, said the police chief. Our officers and investigators work tirelessly to bring the subject to justice. And the church has announced that all services are canceled to further notice as the extent of the damage is assessed. The Kansas Catholic Conference condemned the act, calling it a hate crime. In a statement posted on social media, the group described the destruction. After forcing their way inside, statues were destroyed, glass smashed, and other extensive damage exacted upon the sacred space, the conference wrote. St. Patrick Church is a predominantly Latino parish situated in a working-class neighborhood of north central Wichita. The FBI is investigating. A satanic website was scrawled on a wall. This is the face of evil. Catholic Vote also spoke out, sharing details of the incident on X, formerly Twitter, and raising concerns about anti-Catholic sentiment. Some Catholic leaders have linked this act of vandalism to a broader trend of hostility towards religious institutions. And I'll let you read the most of the rest of that, because it does then bring in the fact that there's context that there's a satanic event, this Black Mass happening on the 28th of March in the Kansas Capitol. And as you can see, there seems to be some links there. So I would hope that those in authority in Kansas or in the archdiocese who have the ear of legislators would take a look at those connections and do so quickly before they pull off their event. That should not surprise anybody that there might be some kind of connection there. But meanwhile, up in Canada, in Toronto specifically, there's a nice local tradition you should be aware of. They have a day commemorating John Paul II. They commemorate the late canonized Pope on the anniversary of his visit to Toronto. Canada, though, and especially Ontario, are in the hands of far-left loons who hate the faith. And they've made a rule this year: no Vatican flag on John Paul II Day. Now that's weird, because they've allowed it every year most recently. And so we go to CatholicRegister.org with the headline, Toronto bans Vatican flag on John Paul II Day. Now that's odd. They say officially, this is how the law can be used in the other way. This is due, they say, to a change in the law about religious imagery and religious flags on public property. Yes, in Canada, they now have a law against flying religious symbols in public spaces. But the same province of Canada notoriously broadcasts that over the speaker systems in the modern world or in the public square by voice alone. You'll get people who are calling everybody of a certain crescent moon religion to prayer. Well, Ontario has allowed municipalities to do this, even in communities that don't have a lot of the members of that population in there. They do this during their fake fasting month, and people get upset when I call it a fake fasting month. If you've ever encountered, when I was in college, I knew some students from that part of the world, generally speaking, and they all said the same thing. Their entire cultures stop operating during the day. People start going to work in the late afternoon, and then they'll, as soon as the sunset hits at the proper point, they stop everything and they gorge themselves, and then they do it again before the dawn comes, and then they go home. That's not exactly like Lent, and I wish Cardinal Dolan would stop calling what they do like comparing Lent to what they do, because it's not the same. And this is not disregarding the fact that Catholic practices during Lent in the last half century have become very lax by comparison to how they were beforehand. But let's stop comparing the two. But in this case, Ontario has publicly broadcast their prayer call publicly, while saying you can't put a flag for the Vatican up on public property in commemoration of John Paul II's visit. This is clearly not about being neutral on religion, despite what you are about to hear from them. The flag of Vatican City will not fly over Toronto City Hall to mark the annual St. John Paul II Day for the first time in nearly 2 decades. Recent changes in religious imagery policies will see the city no longer flying religious flags at City Hall. Former City Councilor Chris Korin-Kuzinski, who started the ceremony back in 2006, a year after the sainted Pope's passing, labeled the decision as the end of an era for a ritual dedicated to celebrating the life of one of the most beloved figures in Catholicism. This year, the city of Toronto came out of the blue at the last minute and said that we can no longer raise the flag because no religions are allowed to raise flags anymore, he said. For years, we were allowed to do it, and all of a sudden now the city is saying not to do it, and that is sort of discrimination that we shouldn't tolerate. As Catholics, we should stand up just like other religions do. In an email response to the Catholic Register, the city of Toronto confirmed that flag-raising requests are approved based on the criteria of a flag-raising program. Requests are reviewed annually to ensure the program criteria are applied consistently. An event has not been canceled. A request to fly a flag marking Pope John Paul II Day was declined as it does not meet the program's criteria, as the city of Toronto does not approve flag-raising requests to mark religious events, the statement read. Quote. Meanwhile, all across the same province of Canada, you got that thing being broadcast over their public speaker systems, alerting people that it's time to pray if you're a part of a certain religion or not. Yay, Canada. How very consistent of you. LAM in the chat says, I am from Ontario, and it's a disgrace. All you see is the flag of the first deadly sin everywhere. That is absolutely true. And that is a religious flag, by the way. It's just a religious flag that the devotees to that Black Mass would be most comfortable with. This is clearly their behavior in Ontario here and in Canada, in Toronto especially, is completely consistent with their behavior in other ways. Go back to that trap that Francis fell into. You remember the story of the boarding schools there and the alleged loss of countless young people over like decades there. That story, Francis bought into it fully, turned out to be fake. Many of us at the time knew it was fake, and we tried to warn people. And people were like, oh, I assure you it's real. I'm in Canada, and it's horrible. We have to acknowledge church history. Well, guess what? It turned out to be fake. They did an in-depth investigation into those grounds, and they found literally no evidence that it happened. And yet a lot of church property was destroyed. This is why you never trust the assertions against the church made by the secular authorities. You never trust it, and you never get involved in it. They have an anti-Christ bias. It's what this is. And you see this here with this simple thing. And again, I'm not the biggest fan of the crowd running the Vatican these days or of any of the post-conciliar popes. But clearly, this is a good tradition in Toronto, or at least it was. And what are they doing here? Telling Catholics you don't matter. Maybe we should take their word for it. I'm curious what you have to say about all this, so let me know in the comments. Make sure that you are praying, you participate in the reparation prayers that Archbishop Naumann in Kansas City is calling for, and that and especially when the 28th arrives, that you participate in that if you are able. This is a very serious event, and make sure to participate. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.